all of you in this meeting. Yeah, so as we start, I'd just like to inform us if you have any question, yeah, regarding the event that you're going to have, you can just write it on the chat section. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. So yeah, so with us is Kelvin Demo, who will be our speaker of the day. Yeah, I'd like to invite him. He's the GitHub student ambassador. Yeah, so welcome, Kelvin Demo.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Kelvin. I'm a software engineer and a GitHub campus expert. So today we shall be talking about Git and an introduction to like Git as a tool that you can use to collaborate and work with like other team members in your team. So my internet seems to be having a problem. Okay, sure. So so I can start with a simple question. So who has worked with Git? So if you worked with Git, you can just on the chat section, you can reply with a +1. If you have not worked with Git, you can reply with a -1 before we kick off the session. So Felix, so Selemo -1, Flavian, Luke +1. Okay, so I'm going to kick off straight. So let me share my screen. So the talk, let me share. So screen, which screen? I think it's this one. Just a moment. Okay. So can you guys see my browser? Can you guys see my browser?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, we can
You
see
can.
it.
Okay. Sure. So let me just change the environment. Yes. Okay, so today we shall be talking about Git. So as many of you maybe have, okay, some of you might have interacted with Git, some of you might not have interacted with Git, but basically what Git is, it's just like a language or a tool that enables you to work with other developers with ease and also to be able to collaborate without struggle. So, sorry, somebody wanted to speak? Okay, so we're going to be doing, so let me present my slides. Present here. So we're going to be doing some activities today as we learn Git. We shall be starting with how do you install Git. Then from there, like the basic command to get you started. Then we'll look at some like basic use cases of Git. Then we shall call it a day. So it's the title for the talk is GitHub and GitHub, Git and GitHub for beginners, but it's not like an entirely beginner session. We will deep dive into like some of the a bit advanced concepts that you're more likely to work with Git, and especially how you can work with Git and GitHub. So, yep. So to start us off, so this is what we're going to look. So the first thing is how do you install Git? Then the second thing, what is Git? So that is what we shall be covering. Then how Git works and what is GitHub, and a very quick example of using both Git and GitHub. So let me just cast another screen. So let me stop sharing. Then cast one of the external screens here so that I can use the other one to do some stuff. So so let me share. So it's this one, screen 2. Yeah. So again, can somebody confirm is able to see my my Chrome? So I'm asking because I'm using multiple desktops and sometimes it might not show. So Luke, can you be able to see my screen on
Yes,
Chrome?
I can actually see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Power.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So the first thing that we shall be going to do is to install Git and create a GitHub account. So in the chat section, so you guys can reply quickly. Like if you have a GitHub account, you can reply with a +1. If you don't have a GitHub account, you can reply with a -1, so that I know like if you're going to like go through this first initial step, because it's very crucial. So if you have a GitHub account, you can just reply with a +1. So okay, so Flavian, okay, that is a good start. So we shall then be going straight to installing Git. So so to install Git, it's very simple. So for those ones, so what you do is you just go to the Git website. So you can just Google Git. Then based on the OS, you can be able to like download it from here. So you can download a Windows build. Then you can install like a 32-bit for Windows setup. I didn't want to install it. So you can install the 3264. You can choose any that fits like what you want. So then, yeah, so that is, so for those people who are using Git, there is a tool that is called Git Bash. Git Bash. So you can install Git Bash. So what Git Bash will enable you to do, it will enable you to like more go through the same commands that I'm going to like be using here. So yeah, so it's more of like in Linux or in a Unix system. So some commands might be different in Windows. I've personally like I've used either Linux or Mac since I started coding. So some commands might not work in Windows. So for them to work, just use Git Bash. So install Git Bash if you're on a Windows machine. It's actually like a good terminal that you can start working with. And again, think if you're going to move to Linux. Anyway, so install Git and create a GitHub account. So that is the first step. So for me, I've Git installed. So the way that I can be able to verify it is if you go to your terminal. So let me just open my terminal. So this is a practical session, so it's not like theoretical. So yeah, so let me go to my terminal. Then I have to clear that. Then let me enlarge it. Then ls, then clear, then cd out, clear again, then say now I want to open tmax, then yeah. So after that, we're going to now start. So I'm going to make a directory for this talk. I'm going to call it Kirinyaga. So then I'm going to cd into Kirinyaga there. Then I'm going to open on Visual Studio. I'm also going to move Visual Studio here so that you guys can be able to see it. So I hope that you guys can see my Visual Studio code, right?
We can see your screen.
Okay, so that is what I was talking about. So let me again share fresh. So screen 1, screen 2 is most probably what I'm, okay, it's not. So which screen are you guys able to see?
Your Visual Studio.
You're only seeing Visual Studio Code. You can't see like Chrome or something of the sort.
Right now, we can only see a white screen.
White.
Yeah, a white blank
Okay.
screen.
Okay. screen 2. Why? Okay, can you now see like install Git and create a GitHub account slides on PowerPoint?
Yes.
So can you be able to see the terminal now?
Yeah, we can see the terminal.
Okay. So I've just like created a directory that I'm going to call Kirinyaga. I've seeded into that directory, then I've opened Visual Studio Code on the side. So Visual Studio Code is like the best editor. So it's by Microsoft, so you can check it out. It's the best. It's the best like not editor. How do we call it? Is it a code editor? It's a code editor. I think it's not an idea. So it's the best editor that you can find out there with like some cool awesome extensions. An example is this one for Git, but we'll have a look at that on another day. So the first thing that we want to do is to check if we have Git installed. So after you've gone through the initial stages here, you've gone to the browser. So actually I have them in my slides. So you've gone to you've gone to these links here, you've gone to the Mac side. If you're using Windows, you've gone to Windows. Then you've installed and like you've installed Git into your machine. So the next thing that you're going to do is on your terminal to check if Git is installed, you just type git flag or dash version as I call it. So it will tell you the Git version. So that is like the first thing that you do to check if you have Git installed in your machine. So after that, the second thing is to configure what you want to be displayed when your code is pushed. What I mean by that is if I go to GitHub, for example, /Angular, for example. So what I mean is, for example, you are contributing to Angular. So it's an open source project. So like, for example, you can see Joseph Parrots. Okay, so let's go to the commits section. So we shall be covering more about commits. So where are commits? Okay, they're here. So so this is like what I mean. So Joseph Parrot, Alex Hub, something of the sort. So that is the next step that we're going to go to. So that is the second step that you do. So otherwise, if you don't do that, for me, sometimes it was just defaulting to calling my name here Git. Oh, sorry, Mac, because like that was the name of the machine when I bought it. So it will default to the name of the machine or the name of the user that is logged, the name of the root user of your machine. So to change it, you can actually do git config -- global. So that is the first command. So if you're taking notes, you can write that. So user.name. So you can say that, for example, that your name is Kelvin, for example, Nkundi, something of the sort. So it's going to like have that. So whenever I push my code, it's going to show Kelvin Nkundi. So if you want to also, so you can also configure the email. So you can say git config -- global user.email. So I can put my personal email here, kelvin@gmail.com. Then it's going to config that. So if I now type, I think git config, I've forgotten the command, git config, is it all? Git config -- something. I can just do this and have a look at its list. So git config list. So you can see it's now showing my username is Kelvin, my email. So whenever I push my code, these are like the names that should be appearing in the display. So somewhere here, as you can see here. So this is the first part that you have to do. So the second part is now where we introduce like Git as an idea. So I'm going to go back to the slides. So, and I move to the next slide. So you create a GitHub account. I think most of you have GitHub accounts, which is a good thing. Then now we're going to first understand what is version control. Then once we understand what is version control is when like we can see why we need Git to do some things. So I want you to imagine that you're working on a school project with, okay, let's start with yourself first. So when you're working on your project has around 5 phases. So the first phase is the alpha release. So in your alpha release, you're handling things like login, setting up the folder structure and everything. So then after that, you're going to move to the second part, which is like the beta release. So in the beta release now, this is where like introduce like very robust features. Maybe you want to add authentication using or something of the sort. So, but then on your so after beta it's usually MVP. So the MVP release, you are like, you changed something in alpha, but you are not sure if that's, not that you're not sure, you think, okay, not that you think, you need that change that you made in alpha in your MVP release. So a good example can be you refactored your UI. So like you spent a lot of time writing your user interface. Then when you are doing alpha, you are like, I don't need it now. So you refactored everything, deleted everything, and like put what you needed there. Then you committed your code and everything was okay. But in the MVP now, so beta has passed, the MVP has passed, so it's like 2 years, 1 year down the line, you actually need a change that you made 1 year ago. So there's no way that if you're not using a version control system, and I'm going to explain how version control comes in there. If you're not using a version control system, then there's no way that you're going to track the various versions of like your software. So what I mean by that is, ideally what you can do is you can go to your computer and create folders. You can create folder for week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So whenever you start week 1, you take week 1's work, then you start it on week 2. If you're going to start on week 3, you take week 2's work, you start it on week 3. But then that will mean that, number 1, you'll have to decide that your work must be achieved at the end of the week. So that is just a scenario. Then another thing it is that it might be chaotic. So what if your laptop is stolen? So that is one thing. What if you forget, for example, where you stored your files or something? Maybe you delete your files accidentally. So a lot of things can happen. And by the time you reach MVP, your product might be just one file that you forgot to delete and you deleted the others. So what Git does is that it simplifies that problem and enables you to keep track of records of your changes. So the changes that you make to your files, you can be able to track how they were able to evolve over time. So for example, if you go to this Angular project, you can be able to see it from the time it was started up to now. So you can be able to track the changes, how they've occurred and all that. So that is where Git is very important. So and one good thing is that you can revert to any change and go back to a previous state. So for example, if you wanted to go to a change that you made 2 years ago, you can just do that with one command, go back to that specific change, and you can maybe merge that change to like your current work, then start off from there. Yeah. So that is basically like version control. So it's just keeping records of the changes that you've made. So then another thing, it also allows for collaborative development, and this is very important. So it allows for something like this. Many people, if you go to the insight section, you can see, if you go to the contributors, you can see, so this is like the Angular project, for example, like it has quite a good number of contributors, many of them. So with version control, you can be able to do this, like you can be able to contribute in a project and work like in a team with many people. Yeah. So that is also, we're also going to cover that in another section. Yeah. So that is the version control part. So we're going to go, what is Git? So so Git is a distributed version control system. So you can go to the documentation. So you can go to the Git documentation. So if you go to the Git documentation, this is the best place. The documentation is always the best place where you can get like information that you need. So you can go to, I think it's basics. I don't want videos. I want the book. I think I need the reference. So if you go to the, is it here? Okay, if you go to somewhere in the documentation, you will find something that is called distributed version control versus centralized version control systems. So it's not in my slides. So that is why. So you can have a look at this. So we have DVS, sorry, distributed version control. Yeah. So you have a distributed version control system and a centralized version control system. So the main difference between a centralized and a distributed is that basically in a distributed version control system, everyone has a local copy of the work. While on a central version control system, like the copy is kept like on or the history of the changes are from on a central server where everyone has to request the latest version of the work and pushes the latest change to. So you can just like go and read the main difference between a centralized and distribution version control system, but it's not in my slides because if you're going to work with Git, it's just a distributed version control system. You're going to have a copy in your machine, so you can do the research on the centralized by your own. That is an assignment for you. So what distributed, so with Git, users basically keep the entire code and history on their location, on their machines. So you can make any changes without having an internet access. Then you can't push or pull from a remote server. We shall be talking about pushing and pulling, but you can make changes without like internet access. You can edit your files, commit them. Then if you live in a place like where I come from, so you can record your changes. Then you can, if you come now to like place where there's internet, you can commit them and push them. Yeah. So that is about version control. So what's the question so far? Anybody with a question, you can just raise your hand. I will be able to see it. Okay, so let's now move to our next part. So what is Git? Git was started by 2005. It was created by Linus Torvalds to aid the Linux kernel development. So basically, Linux kernel is like what powers almost everything in computing. So from your phones, the Android phones that you use, laptops, anything, most of the things to say. So it's usually covered like by the Linux, by Linux kernel, most of it. So it was started to help like in the management of this project. It was started by Linus Torvalds. So one thing is that there are other version control systems. We have Subversion, we have that one, Mercurial, yeah, Perforce and all that. So, but we think, of course, Git is like the best because it's the best. Because we think it's the best. Yeah. So we're going to go to the third stage of our talk, and we shall be talking about how Git works. So this is now where we shall like be starting our demo. But before maybe I start that, I can ask if there's anybody with a question. So if you have a question that you feel needs to be attended to, ask now so that I can answer you. So you can raise your hand. Okay, yeah, somebody wants to ask a question.
My question is how to install the Git extension on Visual Studio Code.
Or how to install the Git extension in Visual Studio Code. So you can go to extensions part in Visual Studio Code. On the extensions card, you can just type Git. Is it actually Git? It's called, or is it? It's called Git Lens. So you can search for Git Lens. Yeah, it's this one. It has 6 million downloads, so you can install that. So with Git Lens, you can be able to see who made changes to a specific line of code. And that is like the part I'm also going to talk about, like about how Git can ensure that you keep people in your team accountable. Yeah. Okay. So you can just go to the extension section. So the icons there, extensions, then you can search for Git Lens. So thanks for the question. So how does Git work? So the Git can be complicated at first. I don't think so, but there are a few concepts. I wrote the slides, but I still don't think it's complicated. So the important Git terminology in the slides that we're going to have are going to be in blue. We're going to cover them like in a very short period of time, then start our demo. So the first key concept is snapshot. So if you go to the Git documentation, so snapshots is the way that Git keeps track of your code history. So what snapshots are, they're essentially records. They're records like of all your files at a given point in time. So whenever like you want to have a certain repository to be tracked by Git. So when you start tracking it by Git, you're just keeping a snapshot of your repository of your folder at a specific point in time. So you decide to take, so you're the one who decides to take like the snapshot, and you decide to take it by committing, which I'll be talking about that, and of what files. So you can have many files, you can have like 50 files, and you can decide to like commit only 10. So yeah, so that is like the first thing. So then the second concept, which is like the key concept of Git, you can say so, it's like the committing part. So the commit is the act of creating a snapshot. So we have now snapshots, which basically are the ones that define the idea behind Git. Then we have now a commit, which is like the process of making a commit. So you hear people say that I committed code, I just made a new commit, just pushed the commit to develop. So that is basically just pushed the snapshot representing the changes that is made to a certain branch. Shall be talking about branches. So a project is made up of a bunch of commits. So for example, if you go to the Angular project, which is here, I don't know, I used Angular, you can see if you go to Angular, yeah, there, so you can see like we have 19,337 commits. So those all commits are the ones that make this Angular project be the Angular that you can be able to use to create web applications. So this is 19,337 commits. Yeah, so a project is made up of a bunch of commits. So commits contain 3 pieces of information. So the first thing is it contains a hash. So it's something that will uniquely identifies your commit. Like it will never be the same, regardless of whose machine you are in. So they contain a message. So you have a message, then we have a hash code that basically represent that specific commit. Then we have a reference to the commit that came before it. The only way that I can be able to track history is to know who was before me. Like the only way that you can be able to say you are the third born is to know is the second born. So that is the same with commits, or is to have a second born, sorry. So that is the same with commits. So you should have a parent commit, then you should have a hash code, then you should also have like a message that tries to describe what changes you are trying to do. So key concepts, repositories. So repositories often shortened as a repo. It's just a collection of all the files and the history of those specific files. So it consists all your commits, and this is a place where like your hard work is stored. So this is the place where if you mess up, you're just going to be fired with you're just going to go. There's no excuse. You're gonna go. So repositories can live on a local machine, on a remote server. So a remote server, something like GitHub, for example, it's like where, so for example, as you can see here, this repository resides here, but I can also like bring it to my own machine through a process that we call cloning. So we shall also be like looking at an example of cloning. Yeah. So another thing, so I'm going to share these slides so that I'm going to share them with Luke so that you can share with you guys so that you can go through them. But I can also give a link of them in the chat section. So another key concept is under repositories is the act of pulling. So we have pulling and pushing changes. So, but before we even go there, let's start by going through a short demo, like of what we've talked so far. So let me check my time, 4:39. Okay. So let's create a file here. So I want us to assume that we're creating a website like for Kirinyaga University. It's an HTML website. So we have our index.html, so it's an HTML website. Then we have HTML5 here. Then we have Kirinyaga University. You can save that. Then we can come here and say that we have like 2 divs, and we're going, so 2 divs. So we have a div. Okay, I'm not going to write CSS, but I'm just going to like open it on the browser. I don't know why I did that, but just did it. Just for the, okay, it's just open there. So then We're not going to style it. We're just like going to add some HTML here and there. So the first thing is now we want to start working on this project. So when you start working on a project, before you give your teammates like the base structure to start from. So what usually happens is that if you're working on a React project, for example, you create the base folder for your team, and then you assign tasks so that each person can start working on a task based on a certain agreed principle, for example, something of the sort. So what we're going to do is now we're starting our project. So the first thing is initialize this specific repository with GitHub. So what we're going to do to be able to do that, we just do git init. So git init is going to tell Git that there's a new folder here that I want you to start tracking or taking snapshots of. So that is what is the git init repository does. So for you to be able to know that your repository doesn't support Git, what you do is you just type git status. So if you type git status, it tell you that this is not a Git repository. So to initialize it with Git, you just say git init. So it will tell you that initialize an empty repository in users Mark Kirinyaga. So this is like where the location is. So this .git is where everything will be tracked in. I honestly like never knew about that folder for quite some time. So don't give a crap about it most of the time. You will start working with it after some time, but not now. So we're going to do something here. So, okay, I wanted to say that I have this called master branch. So the way that you can be able to see my terminal here, I'm using a terminal that we call, or my Zish, it's a terminal extension. So it's available on both Linux, I think, and Mac. So you can have a look at it. So it will just enable you to like see more information, especially if you're working in a team where everybody works in a branch. It's gonna enable you to know which branch you are in so that you don't mess other people's work. So you can check it out. I'm going to share a link on the description of the video. So I'm going to share a link here so that you guys can have a look. So it's there. So you can download it if you want like your terminal to look like this, and it's very beneficial. You can download it or look for a gist. So or my Zish install gist. So there's like this gist here. It's a gist or a gist, something of the sort. So you can also use that to install. So it's a very helpful terminal. That is why I'm like taking my time to share these for you guys to have that. Yeah. So that is the first part. So we initialized our Git, our repository with Git. So the first thing is you see there is a master name there. So master is like a branch. So in Git, the main concept is like Git works with branches. So let me just, I think I don't know if I can get like an image that I can use to explain that. So let me Git branches images. So sorry for not, okay. So let me just look for a branch with a tree. Is there one? Okay, I wanted to explain it not using this way because it's a bit confusing for now. Okay, so I'm just going to use tree. So let me just add that. Yeah, so I'm going to use this one. This one looks good. So basically, when you start your work, in Git, everything works in a branch. So this here in the middle is the main branch, or it's like the master branch. This is where when you initialize your repository, like you start from. So then when you now start, so inside the main branch, you can still be having commits. So what you see here are like commits that are in the master branch. GitHub has renamed it to the main branch. So that is why I'm using that main branch name. So when you want to start working on something, what usually happens is that you don't touch the main branch. So I can give you a good example. Recently, LinkedIn updated their team. So if you are a developer in their team, you couldn't touch the previous deployed site until the manager or the product manager gave a go ahead for you to do that. So that work existed on a branch. So there was a main branch that is what is deployed for customers to see. Then there is another branch. So that is you can have now, for example, this here, it's a login branch to handle login. So once you've worked on login and it's complete, you can now move it and cut it from there and add it to to the main branch. So all the changes that you've worked on this login branch will be in the main branch. So you can also create another branch. You can call it, for example, theme configuration. You want to change your theme. Then on your theme, from your theme configuration, you can create another branch from your theme configurations to work on another theme. So then once you're done, you can just merge the parent branch to the main branch, or ideally you can merge even this one because it's just containing commits from here to commits to here. So we shall be talking about that. I'm going to keep this image. After some time, you guys, if you have not worked with Git, you're going to understand this image, how it works fully. So we're going to now start with the first thing. So the first command is git status. So git status, it enables you to check the status of your repository. Is it clean? Like, have you made any changes that you need to commit? So when you type git status, you will be told if number one, if you have commits, if there are files that are being tracked, or if there are changes that you want to start tracking. If there are changes that are not have not been tracked. So far we have initialized our repository with Git, but we've not started tracking files in that specific repository. So to be able to start tracking files, what you do is you just say git add. So you say git add. So when you say git add, you specify the file. So you can say git add index.html, for example. So what that will do, it will add index.html, which is like the file that you want to use our website for, to start being tracked by Git. So you add it to the staging area. So we have something that we call a staging area. So a staging area, so let me clear my terminal. So if again you type git status and you look here, so you will see that changes to be committed. So this is the staging area now here. So this is where the changes that you want to be committed reside. So for you to commit the changes, you have to use another commit, which is git commit, another command, sorry, git commit -m, for example, add index.html. So you can add that. So once you do that, if you look somewhere here, you saw even the coloring changed. So you saw some things happen. So I'm going to redemo that. So once you do that, so you've now created, you've actually gone through the initial life cycle of Git. So far you are on the intermediate level in part of understanding how Git works. So if you now type git status, you will be told that you are on the branch master, there's nothing to commit, the working tree is clean. So by the working tree is clean is that you have not made any changes. So what we've done is we've added files to the staging area using git add. Then after adding files, we've committed them. Now we checking the status and seeing if your repository is clean or not clean, something of the sort. If you have made any changes or yeah. So anybody with a question so far? So you can just raise your hand if you have a question. So that is the first thing. So after we've done that now, I want us to assume that we've added we can even decide to style this. So we've added, for example, you say that you want to add, two divs. So we want to add two divs here. So the first one is going to contain something like role, let's say 500 with 500 words. The second one, you can say it's going to contain, let's say, lorem 500 also with 500 words. So we've added that, then we can save. Yep. So that is the changes that we've made. So if we go to our browser now here, so you can see our website it has quite some good number of words there. So we've made a change. So the second thing is, once you've made a change, you have to let Git know that you've actually made a change. And the way that you can do that is, again, if you type git status, sorry, Git already knows that you've made a change. You don't have to let it know. It already knows that you've made a change. So what you have to do is you have to confirm that this is the change that I wanted to make. And the way that you confirm is by committing. So you can again say git commit -m add description. So this is how like you write a commit message. So I'm going to share with you guys a Git cheat sheet that you can either print or you can pin it on the wall. You can use it. All these commands are there. So you can git commit -m. Let's say you add description. So it will tell you that changes not staged for commit. And the reason is because once you edit a file, number one, you have to add the file to the staging area. Then after adding it, you can now commit it. So I first have to start with git add index.html, then git commit dash. So if I now type git status, it will now be green. So this green is the file that is in your staging area. So I can now type git commit -m updated index.html. So this message ensure that like it is descriptive of what you are doing. So you can say updated index.html to include description, for example, and everything is okay now. So if we now type git status again, you'll be told that nothing to commit, the working tree is clean. So now after doing that, you can, another important thing is you can be able to check the number of commits that you've made. So you can check that by saying git log. You can do that. So you can see at 1651, I made a commit that is called updated index.html. At 1648, I made a commit that is called add index.html. It has the author, it has the date. So you can actually be able to reach out to me and say, you're the one who messed at a specific point in time. So just go there and fix what you did there. So you can even see if you come to the VS Code somewhere here and you weke mouse yako with this git length extension, it will tell you that you are the one who made this commit on November 14th at exactly 4:48 p.m. So this is like the git length extension. So if there are many people in a team, you'll be able to know at this point it is somebody who made this change. So if you don't understand his code, you can just reach out to him and tell him that there's something about your code that I don't understand, then he can elaborate it. So that is like how you can be able to add, commit, and like use files, add, commit, and track files with Git. So what was the question now? So anybody with a question? So we are good. So can I ask some?
Okay. How do backend and front-end developers work together on Git when sometimes they're working on different languages?
Okay, so let me actually I can show you that can answer that question with a good example. So I have a project that I've been working on that is called like this. So it's private. So this is the backend. It's written in Python Django. So this is the backend. Then I have the front end, which is written in Angular slash. So I have the front end, which is written in Angular over here, which I'm also currently writing using React. So this is the front end that is written in Angular. And here you can like be able to see, you can be able to open and see the deployed site and something. Okay, you can't actually see it. So this is the front end written in Angular. This is the backend written in Python. So ideally, these two projects, they exist separately. Like I'm able to contribute in this both too because I know I can be able to code in both Django and Angular. But this backend project, it exists separately as the front end. So what the front end does is, since you asked the question, I'm going to answer it to you, is you deploy the backend. So if I come here and say I want to go to somewhere there, so this is like where all the endpoints are currently documented. So if you want, so as they load, so what happens is that in an Angular applications, there are usually something that we call services that make API calls to the backend. So for example, if you go to the auth service, if you scroll down, you can see it's making this .http.post, taking something, then this .auth URL/login. So what this is doing, it's calling this other application. So this application is coded by me and Bonaventure. The front-end one is written by me and certain lady called Walobo. So the two exist differently. So in each application, there's a mechanism. There's a mechanism for you to call the backend and get back the data. So I can be able to call this application that is deployed, and I'm going to show you a cool resource on where you can be able to deploy your applications. So this, it's deployed here. So if you go to Heroku, so Heroku is just a hosting platform. So if you go to Heroku, so the backend is deployed on another instance, the front end is deployed on another instance. So what happens is that the backend calls the front end. So, sorry, the front end calls the backend. So this is the backend, actually this is the front end. So the backend from here will make a call to the front end will make a call to the backend. And once it returns data, then the front end will use that data to update the UI, something of the sort. So the front end has a mechanism of like updating data and how it can be able to call your backend as long as it's an API. So we'll talk about APIs on another day. So that is how like you can be able to do it. So I'm going to give you some resources on how you can be able to access Heroku for free. So it's like a limited, it's a premium thing. So I'm going to give you that at the end of the talk. But that is ideally how you do it. So the front end and the back end teams, they don't have to even communicate or know each other. What happens is you just give me where your endpoints are documented. You tell me that, Kelvin, for you to be able to log in, you have to call this endpoint. You need to pass in the email, the password, and you'll get back a token. So these are like the credentials that are needed. If you want to, for example, post something, you need to give me the form and form principal, then I'm going to return you the data. So as a front-end engineer, what you need, you don't need to know how the back-end code works. So you just need to focus on the front end, know the endpoints, the data that the endpoints expect, and the data that is being returned so that you can be able to render it on the UI. So you can organize a talk on how you can be able to consume APIs in the near future. So, but that is not scope this talk, but I had to answer it. Yeah. So that is, have I answered your question?
Yes, clearly.
Sure. So, so that is the first part. So if you type git log, you can be able to see everything that you want to see and something of the sort. So you can actually add more files. So let's assume that we add a CSS file. So we can call it main.css. Then here we say that maybe our body, we want it, the display to be grid, for example. Then we want the grid template columns to be 1FR, something of the sort. Then we save that. Then here we add our CSS, which points to main.css. So we save that. So if we check our application now, you see it is displaying in two rows. So one half. So you can, yeah, so it's displaying in two rows. That is basically what you've done. You say that you want it to be displayed in two columns, sorry. So we have this column and this column. So after you've done this, so we want us to assume that this is a feature that we were talking about. So you can add a grid. Okay, there's no grid space. So after that, we've linked our HTML, we've linked our CSS, then we've added another file that we're going to call about.html. So in the about.html again, HTML5, we've said this is our about this application, something of the sort. Okay, something of the sort. So we've done something like that. So this is like our entire application now. So if we now type git status, so I want us to check now what happens. So we have modified. So these are the changes that we've not set commits. Then we have added two files. They're not being tracked. Remember, as I said, we have to explicitly tell Git that I want you to track these two files. So what you do is you can add each one of them. So you can add index.html, or you can just say git add dot, and it will add everything. So dot will add everything. So if you do that, then you type git status, then you're going to see changes to be committed. So you can now commit your changes and say git commit -m update the web page. Okay, sorry for that message. So update the web page, something of the sort. then it's okay. So if you now type git status, it will tell you that the working tree is clean. So that is basically how, that is in most cases, if you're working on a project alone, the things that you're going to interact with when working with Git, as simple as that. So that is like, so was a question up to there? Okay, so there's no question, so we can move on. So the next thing that I want to cover, I want to go to Lucy. So the next thing that I want to cover is about branches. So branches are the thing that is very important if you want to be hired by somebody. So if you're planning to leave this call, this is like the part that you need before you leave. So so this is like a talk that I had last week with Moi University, and I'm going to use the same logic to explain it to you here. So this is how the concept of branches works. So when you start working on a project, or when you are hired into a team, usually start from the develop branch. So what happens is whoever creates this repository is going to create the master branch, and once he creates the master branch, is going to create a develop branch. So the way that you create a branch, so a branch basically contains code that does not exist on another branch unless you merge it to that specific branch. So unless you merge it to master, it will only exist on the branch that you just created. And I'm going to show that. So we're going to start here with our master branch. So we can call this master branch. So this master is deployed to production. So by production is like where the users can be able to see it. So for example, let's assume this is Facebook engineering. Let's assume we're working with Facebook or something of the sort. So here on the dev branch, this is where currently all the work that developers are working exists. So if you're hired to like start working with Facebook, you shall be working from this specific branch here. So then once you finish your work, so once you start, let's say to start working on login, what you do, is there a question? Okay, so once you start working on, so let's say you've been given a feature to update the login design or something of the sort. So the first thing that you do is you create a branch from the develop branch, dev branch, to your login branch. So here in your login branch is where you're going to write all your code. So you're going to write your TypeScript, your HTML, anything that you're going to write here. So that the code that you're going to write, it's not going to appear here, not unless it has been reviewed by your teammates. So that is very important. So this branch will enable you to write your code that will only reside there. And once it has been reviewed to your teammates, then it will be merged to the dev branch now. So there's something that we call a pull request. So a pull request is, you're going to also see it in action. So a pull request is basically you asking for other developers to have a look at your work. So after your work has been reviewed, so the next step is review, then now it can be merged to the dev branch, because here now, here the people that are involved can be people like, for example, product managers, design leads. So design leads, all those people. So design leads, also teammates, PMs, PMs are product managers, all those people. So once the review has happened, then your work is merged back to the dev branch. So, and one interesting thing is that you can be working on a lot of, you can be working on like many, you can be working on many branches. Many people can be working on many branches at the same time. So for example, Luke can be working on login. Then I can say that I'm going to give Noella the task to work on social login. Then I'm going to give somebody else, Felix, for example, to work on sign up. So what it's going to happen is that once Felix is done, he's also going to create a pull request. So after creating a pull request, the same thing, review is going to happen, then his work is going to be merged. Same thing to, I don't know, I said here, I think it was Noella most probably. She's also going to, like, once she finishes her work, she's also going to create a pull request that is going to be reviewed, and once it's reviewed, it's going to be merged here. So this is like how the flow looks like, and I'm going to like show you how that happens in code now. So what you do in commands, I don't know if knowing Git is knowing how to code. So what you do is the first thing that I want us to do is to create a GitHub repository. You can go to my GitHub account. So I usually have an organization for giving talks, because I realized my repositories are becoming many, so I can come here and create a repository that I'm going to call Kirinyaga University, for example. Then I'm going to say that it's not going to be private. I'm going to create a repository. So once you create a repository, you have to link it to the one that you have here for you to be able to push your work from your local machine to here. So you have to, like, of course they have to have a link. And the way that you can have a link is basically there's this command here, git remote add origin. So what this does, it's going to add this URL here to your repository. So once you try pushing your work, you're going to be pushing to this URL. So what you're going to do is do this. So we don't want to create a new repository. We just want to push an existing repository from the command line because we have already an existing repository here. So you're just going to copy this command, git remote add origin. So if we copy that and paste it here, so git remote add origin, it's just going to, so this is like the link. This is what GitHub uses to identify this repository on GitHub. So this repository that we just created. So what we do is we say git remote add origin, that one. So after we do that, even though we type git remote, then we're going to see there is like origin. So you can be able to push to many repositories. So for example, I can also add git remote add origin. So instead of calling it origin, I can call it something like Heroku. I want to push to Heroku, for example, to deploy my app. I can also call it Heroku. So if I type git remote now, to tell me that it has Heroku and it has origin. But for now, these Heroku and origin have the same values. They have this git.github at Kelvin demo something kirinyaga.git. So they have the same value. So there's no like difference. But this usually happens when you're trying to deploy your app to Heroku. So after doing that, we're going to go to the next step. We're going to git branch -m main. So that is basically creating a new branch. So git branch -m. So you create a new branch, then you check out to that branch. But this is like, I've honestly never used -m. I'm using it like for the first time. So I'm going to show you a new way to create a branch. So once you do that, so what you've done is that you've created a branch that is called main. And as we said on our diagram here, if you create a branch from here, it's going to come with everything up to this point, up to the point where you created it. So if you create it from here, it's going to come with, so all these are commits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to come with all these commits. Then now you can continue working with your work from there. As simple as that. So if we come here, so if we now type on this git log, then you see we're going to see the commits on like master that are still on our main branch. So that is what is happening. So it's just like this diagram that is in play on this other end. Then now, remember you have already linked your repository to GitHub. So to push your work to GitHub, what you do is you just say, can again copy your command here, git push -u origin. So this u means upstream. So what it means is that I want you to push to origin, and origin is what we have here as git at github.kelvindemo. So GitHub will be like, okay, I understand you're trying to push to this repository, and you've called it origin. So origin is basically this URL here. So I understand you're trying to push to this URL, and you're trying to push to the main branch. And you're trying to say that once you push, so the -u says, once you push, I want you to be able to create a connection between the two branches such that next time I'm just going to push to that specific branch directly. So that is what git push -u origin main does. So you'll see this command most of the time when you create a new branch. So you can now type enter. So if you type enter, it's going to, of course, wait for the internet. So it's pushing everything. So if we now go to our GitHub and refresh it, so you can see our files are here, about.html, index.html with our 3 commits. So you have our 3 commits here. with yeah, so those are our files there. So as you can see, we have our files being there. Yeah. So that is like the first part of like linking your repository to GitHub. So it's as simple as that. You just create a repository, you follow the steps, then boom, you push it to your GitHub account. So after pushing it, now we want to start working with branches. So for example, I'm working on a task with, let me look for somebody. I'm working on a task with an easier name, LC. Okay, LC. So I'm working on a task with LC. So LC is working on login, I'm working on sign up. So we start what we want to, so ideally if you think about it, as a user, to be able to log in, I must sign up. So LC's task of sign up must be completed before I start working on my login task. So that because I need to like first log in. But ideally, that should not be the case. I should be able to work on login as LC's works on sign up. Then after I complete, I'm going to raise what we call a pull request. LC's work is going to be merged first. Then once LC's work has been merged, I can pull LC's work to my branch, then push my branch again. Okay, let me now show what I mean by that. So the first thing is to create a new branch. So to create a new branch, we just say git checkout -b feature login. So you're going to call it FT login. So FT is for like, it's a feature that you're going to call login. So we create that branch there. So that is where I'm going to do on my login work. So I've switched to that specific branch. And here, I'm going to create a file that we call login.html. So my login.html is going to contain some login logic. Here, for example, I can have a form. Inside the form, I can have an input. Can say that we have, for example, 5 inputs, something of the sort, blah, blah, blah. So that is our login form there. So after doing that, so I've checked out to a new branch. So I can now commit. So anything that I commit is going to remain in this branch. So that is very important. So before going to another branch, something that is usually a disaster, especially when you're working in a team, ensure that you've committed your work so that you don't go to the main branch, you push your work and you cause some unwanted things on production. So ensure that you have always committed your work before checking out. So you can say git add dot for everything, git commit -m add login logic. So after doing that, I can push the branch to GitHub. So I can say git push. So after pushing it, will tell me, oh, you need to set upstream and all that. So that is, so you can say git push -- set upstream. So what that does is, again, it creates that connection between this branch and the one that you want to create on the remote server there on GitHub. So ft login. So most of the time, I always copy this command. You can just copy it and paste it on the terminal. So if you push it, then you come to, so you'll see that it's already pushed a new branch. Yeah. So after doing that, I want you now to check what happens here, where I'm cycling, where we have like the files. So let me enlarge it. If I try checking out to main. So when you create a new branch, I'm going to share again commands, so you don't have to, they'll just become part of you. So you don't have to cram it during this call. So I've created a login branch. So I want to create another feature that is called register, but I'm not the one working on it. It's LC that is working on it. So I'm LC now. So LC is not having this branch here called FT login. It just has the main branch. So what you can do, you can check out. So to change branches or to switch branches, you just say git checkout the branch you want to switch to. So we've switched to main. So git checkout main. So what happened is, if you realized, the login file is no longer here. Why? Because it's even saying that it's deleted up here, though. So it's saying that it's deleted. So it's not available here because it is, Git already knows that it's not in this branch, it's in the FT login branch. So that is where it belongs. So here, LCs can check out to his own branch. So the way that you create a new branch is git checkout -b. So that is for a new branch, FT register. So here on register, you can create a register.html file, then have an HTML document, then here you can say something like register, for example. Okay, let me stretch. Okay, you can say something like register. Then after that, you can our process again, git add. You can actually do something like, it's usually git add mess. Okay, I've forgotten the shortcut. So you can git add dot git commit dash m add register functionality. So after doing that, I can again push the branch. I can just come here and copy this. Nope. I wanted to copy this. Copy, paste it there. I'm going to push it. So so this branch is again going to reflect here in a few seconds. But this is what our customers are being able to see currently. They can't see the work that I've worked on login. They can't see the work that LCs has worked on register. So what we have to do is we have to merge the two branches. So again, going back to our tree, we have to take this branch here, bring it here, say that, hey, you belong here. So tuitoe, tuiweke hapa. So we can delete it after removing it. Then we like ensure that we transfer all the commits to the master branch. So all the changes that else is added are going to be passed to the master branch. So same to other branches, you can be able to do something like that. So I'm almost winding up. So if you now come here, we can now go to GitHub. So we can now talk about what we call a pull request. So on GitHub, I can now say that I want to get some feedback on this feature that I worked on that is called login. So I can create something that we call a pull request, which I'm going to explain what it is. So a pull request is basically you're trying to merge your work to the main branch. So so this is the base branch, the main. FT login is the branch that you're trying to merge your work from. So you can say that you want to add login logic, for example, something of the sort. So you can add a description. So there's usually a description that I prefer. So, okay, so my machine just decided to do me. So there's usually a description format that is usually very good. So I can just come here and say that I want to edit, then copy it, then come here, then just paste it. So this is basically the description. So I can just come here and say that this pull request adds the following. It adds login functionality. So, yep. So once I do that, if I preview, everything is okay. I can now say that I want to create a pull request. So after creating this pull request, so somebody now who is reviewing, for example, somebody is the team lead, he can come and say, oh, this pull request adds login functionality. Immediately, if he's a manager, or if he's like your technical lead, is going to head to the files changed section, then here he can be able to leave comments. So for example, I can review and say that why do we have 5 comments, 5 inputs here? They should be 2. So I'm going to add a review. So this is, you can assume this is not my work. So then after that, I'm just going to, I can't request changes for my work. So I just need to comment. So after doing that, I can just add that specific comment. Then somebody will be alerted that a comment has just been added. Then we'll go back to his code. Oh, this is the login functionality. Somebody will go back to his code, can say git checkout, ft login. So again, the login file will come back here. Then we will remove, for example, 3 of the input fields there. Then say git add dot git commit -m, remove other inputs, something of the sort. Then you can push. Then once he has pushed, they can just come here and say this has been resolved, something of the sort. Can again comment it. So somebody else will come and review the work. go through it. So I can mark the conversation as resolved because I've worked on it. So then once everything is okay, I can now come here and say that maybe something like this looks good to me. So I'll git here, so looks good to me. I can comment that. And if I'm not, if this was not my pull request, I could have approved it. So there could have been an approve button somewhere here. So once I say that this is okay, now we can merge this pull request. So by merging, we basically mean we can take this work and like add it to the main branch. So you can just come here and say that you want to merge and we want to confirm that is okay. Then boom. So if we go now to Kirinyaga University here, we can now see we have our login.html file here. So our work just merged. So this work might have taken like months, but still the customers were able to see these other 3 files that we deployed to them. So this is just a new functionality that has been added. So you can see now the power in that. So you can also create another branch to enable maybe people to like register, compare the changes and all that, add the description, then after that, it can be merged to the main branch, as simple as that. So if we now go back to git checkout main, before I start working on any other branch, I have to do one thing. I have to do a git pull. So I have to pull the new changes that have just been added. So if I now pull, I want to look at these files here. You see login.html just appeared, though it was not on main, and it is telling you that it was just added there. So that is because the login file was merged. And that is it with branches, as simple as that. So if you go through my slides, I think that was like the last thing. So branches, we've talked about master, talked about branching, we've talked about merging, talked about adding a commit, so all that. So we've talked about most of that. We've talked about GitHub, and like that is the end of the talk there. So yeah. So was any questions? Any question? Cindy?
What does Git cloning do?
Oh, that is a very good question. So if Cindy wanted to work on this project, what she'll just do is she'll come here on the code section, click on code, and then copy this URL. Then she can go to the terminal. I can just come here and say Control B. So she can go to the terminal. So I can create another folder. So I can make CD Kiri. So inside Kirinyaga, maybe I can make a folder that we call, no, that will be a bad idea. So let me just CD into here, then make a directory that we call. So inside here, I can git clone this specific URL. I just say git clone, then paste this. So once I do that, and I clone to Kirinyaga University, so if I CD Kirinyaga, so it just brings all this work to my local machine. CD Kirinyaga University, then I open the editor. You see again, it's those same files. Actually with like the specific, even the specific branches, as long as the branches were pushed. So if I say something like, again, git checkout ft register, it will check out the register branch. Git checkout login, we didn't delete the login branch. So if we check out login, it will check out the login branch. You can again say git checkout to main. So it will again, so it's basically more of bringing like a project to your local machine. So if you're onboarded to a team, they'll give you access to the repository. So your work is to clone it, then start working from there. Yeah, nice question.
That's nice. Also, what is Git Actions? What are they and how can you use them?
Okay, so those are like GitHub actions. So GitHub actions, right? So GitHub actions, they are more of, they help you build and deploy your project. So it's something, so you have to like be very, you you have to at least have like, it's automating your workflow. So by workflow, I mean, you see the way that we've created a branch here, actually what I've just described to you guys is a Git workflow. So, and I'm going to give you Git workflow, Git branch workflow, at least, and I'm going to give you an article to read about it. It's this one. So you can go and read about. So this is a workflow that I've actually like talked about here. So GitHub Actions, what they do is they enable you to like automate your workflow. So what I mean is that, you see, once I merge this pull request, so there's actually something like that on like this project. So if I come here, if you raise a pull request, number one, it has to pass. It has to ensure that the current tests that are existing are passing. So let me just show you. So for example, this pull request that this guy added. So it has to ensure that the current tests that I have are passing. So if those tests are not passing, then you can't even be able to merge it. So you see the merge button is disabled. So what GitHub Action does, it basically automates this process. So you can create a pull request, it can merge it if the test passes. Then once it merges it, you can be able to like merge it to develop. Then once from develop it again, like it can build your project again, see if everything is okay. And if something is failing, then it's going to like alert you. So for example, for this guy, there's some tests that are failing. So that is why his work is not yet merged. So if you look at Travis CI, it's a build tool. So some things are failing from his end. So GitHub Action it's trying to achieve something like that. It's just more tries to automate your workflow, the workflow that you're working on, from the time that a developer works on it to the time that it reaches to the customer. Yeah. So it enables you to build, test, and publish your work. Yeah. So nice question. So I've shared a link on Git workflow. I'm going to share a link on where you can download the Git cheat sheet. Git cheat sheet at leisure. So ensure that you download this. You can print it. You can actually, the best thing is to print it. Print it, have it just by your side. Then you can always use it. So you can just download this copy. So you can always use it whenever you want. So till like the commands become part of you. So that is another part. Yeah. So any other question?
What's the difference between pull and push?
What is the difference between pull and push? So push is when you want to push your work to like a GitHub repository somewhere. Pull is when you want to like bring all the changes for that specific repository to your machine. So for example, while you are working on your login feature for the past 3 weeks, somebody else register, mwingine social authentication, another person's comments has been merged. So for you to be able to actually raise a pull request, you have to ensure that your work is up to date with what is the main branch. So what you do is you say git pull. So if you now check git checkout to like something like register, you can actually merge a branch locally. So you can now say git merge main. So that will merge all the changes in main. Remember, we just added a login file to main, but it's not in register, as you can see here. So you can say git merge main. So if we merge main, then we say that that is the message that you want to merge. It's going to add the login file here. So after you do this, now you have to do a git push to push the changes that you've just merged to your branch to the like remote repository over there. So that is also another important thing. So once you start working on your work, if you raise a pull request, after you've raised the pull request, before it is merged, it always has to be like all the work that is in the main branch has to be in your pull request already. So what you're doing is you are adding some new functionality on top of your work. That is ideally what you're doing. You're just adding some new functionality. So if some feature was merged in between when you are doing your work, you have to merge here. You have to merge the work from the main branch. You pull, then you merge main to your branch. While in your branch, you merge main. So ukiwa kwa branch yako, chukua main, put the new things from main together with the things that already exist in your branch. Yeah. Nice question. So any other question?
How can you like create your just about workflow, creating your DevOps workflow on GitHub?
Okay, so okay, like you can do a very basic one. You can use, okay, like to simplify it, you can use something like Travis, but then you have to like understand. If you're using GitHub Actions, you see if you go through the GitHub Action side, there is something that is written here. So this one, ci.yml, you have to have this file and you have to like read on how you can be able to like do all these things here. So you have to, I've never worked with GitHub Actions so far, but I've worked with Travis CI. So for example, on Travis CI, you just create a travis.yaml file. So then once you do a travis.yaml file, you say that, so you integrate Travis with your repository. So you say that the language is Python, you specify the language Python, you say, if I want you to install the requirements, this is what you do. I also want to run the test, so you can be able to do this. I'm going to use this database. Of course, it has to run tests. Then before the script lands, you can do this. So you can add many other things. But for me, what I'm interested in is the tests. Is the coverage okay? So after I've gotten the test, then I'm okay with everything else. So you can work with Travis. We can have a session about like a simple DevOps strategy, because this might take some time, because again I have to start like explaining some things such as Travis, why you need them and all that. So we can like have a session on like having a DevOps strategy. Maybe we can talk with Luke and we can organize one. So that is session I've promised to do on consuming APIs and having a simple DevOps strategy for like your platform. Yeah. So because of time, we might just skip that. So, but it's so you can reach out to me. I can maybe, okay, I can't promise that I can take you through it. So, but I can look for resources that you can use to go through it. Yeah, but you can just have, so actually once you are on, even on Heroku, you can say that when your app is building, so when your app is building, okay, well, you can say that, for example, for my specific app, I'm saying that on the deploy section, when my app is building, I want to wait for CI to pass before deploy. So I have to wait for Travis. So this is like the travis.ci. I have to wait for it to pass for like my application to be deployed. So your coding, if I merge your work, for it to be deployed, it must pass all the tests. So for example, this is what I'm speaking of here. So it must pass all the tests, return the coverage. For example, it's 91%, and then I can now merge your work. If it's not passing something like this, then your work will not be merged. So as you can see, the tests are failing somewhere here. So we can schedule a session like having a very basic strategy to introduce you to like a simple DevOps strategy for your project. Yeah. So any other question? Okay, so before I hand over to Luke, I want to ask, and please let's like take the only 6 minutes. So who has ever worked with like who knows of the GitHub student pack? You can reply with a +1 or a -1. So +1 if you know of it, -1 if you don't. So Felix +1. Let's hurry. Kila msee reply cause. So Luke +1. So okay, so Cindy +1, so Elijah -1. So Elsie. So Lois -1, Elsie -1. Kelvin +1. Okay, so it's balanced. So basically, what a GitHub GitHub Student Pack is, it's just like something for university students to enable you to like use some premium tools without struggling. So by struggling, I mean without paying for them. So there are some things. So I'm currently working as a software engineer with a certain startup. So there are some things that people usually pay for there, but for me, I don't have to. Something like IntelliJ, for example. So it's an IDE that we usually use for JavaScript and Python. I don't have to pay for that. So Travis CI, for me, I have private builds. So private builds for free while you're a student. So I have private builds. So this is like the CI. This is what somebody asked about just a while ago. So like there are many things that you can do with this. But for me, the highlight, especially for if you're starting like to code, is mostly learning platforms like Educative. So like currently I'm doing a very good course on Educative. So you get 6 months free. You can learn courtesy of like the GitHub Student Pack. There's also Front-End Masters, which is a very good place to learn like front-end development and stuff. So to basically redeem this, all you just have to do is to go, all you have to do is to go to GitHub Student Pack, and if you click on Get Your Pack, if you click on this button here, if you don't have one, then it will give you the instructions. It just requires you to have a school email and maybe a copy of your school ID, as simple as that. So you can redeem it. If you will not be able, just reach out to me on Twitter. So let me share my handle. My Twitter is weird, so, and I don't have, so, but I think it's, let me just share a link. So that is my Twitter handle there. So it's Ndemo Kelvin. Then you can maybe also reach out to me on LinkedIn. So that is my LinkedIn. Come on, please, Lord. So this is my LinkedIn profile. Let me share it. Come on. So view profile. So this is a link to my LinkedIn profile also. Yep. So yeah, so that is it, guys. Back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Kelvin. Yeah, it has been an amazing session. And thank you all for remaining till the end. Yeah, I'm sure we have learned something. Yeah, and we apply it. Yeah, version control is important for you if you are a developer. Yeah, so you can't live without it. So yeah, so unless there is any question, yeah, we can end the meeting. Is there any question? Any question, or are we good? Yeah, so since there is no question, I think we can leave at our own pleasure. And I'll be sharing the slides with you after Kevin shares it with me. Yeah, so yeah, you can leave at your own pleasure. Yeah, goodbye.